Hi, I'm Glenn Steinberg. I teach medieval literature at the College of New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Scott. I'm a professor of medieval and Renaissance literature in the Department of Foreign Languages at National Cheng University in Taiwan.
So we're going to talk today about Canto 9 of the Inferno. And before we get started talking about different ideas that we have, we'd like to give you a little context and a little summary of the canto.
Yes, so the context of the canto is that Dante and Virgil have traveled through the beginning parts of limbo and hell and have reached circle 6. At the end of canto 8, they've crossed the river Styx and they're standing outside the gates of Dis, where the evil spirits have closed the gates against them and started threatening them with violent language. So Dante is frightened, but Virgil assures him that help is on the way. Therefore, Canto 9 begins, quel color que vilta de fuor mi pinge, emphasizing Dante's fear. Virgil expresses some uncertainty, which heightens Dante's apprehension, especially the se non that breaks off in the middle of a sentence. Dante asks if anyone else has ever made a similar journey, and Virgil tells the story of how he was conjured by Eraton and sent to the lowest circle of hell to bring a spirit back to her. Therefore, he knows the way. As Virgil talks about local features like the smell of the swamp, Dante stops paying attention because he notices 3 Furies on the high tower. They are bloodstains with snakes for their hair. Virgil knows them well. They are the traditional Avengers, Megara, Aletto, and Tisiphone. They scream for Medusa to come and turn Dante to stone. Dante sticks close to Virgil, who tells him to turn and cover his eyes. Virgil makes sure that Dante's eyes are covering by using his own hands to cover Dante's eyes. Dante, the poet, invokes those who are smart to see the hidden meaning of this verse. O voi cavete l'intelletti sani, mirate la dottrina che esconde sotto velame dei diversi strani. A loud noise like a violent wind in the forest makes everything shake, and Virgil tells Dante to turn back around. Souls run away like frogs chased by a snake, clearing the way for someone walking on the Styx, but keeping his feet dry and fanning the dirty air from his face. Dante looks at Virgil, who signals he should keep quiet and bow. Dante is certain it is a messenger from heaven who is filled with scorn for his surroundings. The messenger touches the gate of Dis with a little stick, and the way is open. The messenger chastises the outcasts of heaven, perché recalcitrate a quella voglia a cui non quoto I fin, ma esser mozzo e che più volte va crescente dolia. The messenger says nothing to Dante and Virgil, but turns and leaves like he has better things to do. Dante and Virgil enter the city. Dante looks around, eager to see what's happening inside. Mentioning famous cemeteries, Dante noticed sepulchri surrounded by flames heating them up. He hears lamentation and asks Virgil, what kind of people are there? Virgil says, heretics, all packed together and burning. They turn to the right and keep going.
So one of the things that I find really interesting about all of that in Canto 9 is that in a sense, this is one of those times when Virgil is humiliated in the Divine Comedy, where he's made a fool of because he cannot accomplish what he wants to accomplish. And that, in a sense, I think that Inferno 9 is Dante's firmest repudiation of Virgil, his firmest humiliation of the figure. And that is a kind of a newer thought. Traditionally, Virgil was viewed very positively in the poem, and people thought of Dante as focusing primarily on his admiration for Virgil. In more recent time, Dante criticism has seen Dante as being more critical of Virgil and his pagan limitations, and that's become a more increasingly common theme in Dante scholarship, although there are still some current scholars who emphasize Dante's admiration for Virgil. Now, certainly there's a lot of evidence for Dante's admiration for Virgil. If you look back at Inferno 1, lines 82 to 87, for example, when Dante first meets Virgil, the figure of Virgil in the poem, he says, "O degli altri poeti onore e lume, tu sei lo mio maestro e il mio autore, tu sei solo colui da cui ho tolse lo bello stilo che m'ha fatto onore." In Musa's translation, "O light and honor of the other poets, you were my teacher, the first of all my authors, and you alone the one from whom I took the noble style that was to bring me honor." So clearly, Dante has a great deal of admiration for Virgil. But at the same time, in instances like Cantos 8 and 9, Virgil is really humiliated. He's humiliated here because at the end of Canto 8, when they slam the gate in his face, when they slam the door shut in his face, it's really clear that he's not capable, that he can't make this journey happen. Canto 8, lines 115 to 117, "Chiuser le porte quei nostri avversari nel petto al mio Signor, che fuor rimase e rivolsesi a me con passi rari." Our adversary slammed the heavy gates in my Lord's face, and he stood there outside, then turned toward me and walked back very slowly. That, in comparison with what happens in Canto 9, when the heavenly messenger comes, shows just how limited and how incapable and incompetent Virgil is. In Canto 9, lines 88 to 90, "Ai quanto mi parea pien di disdegno," that's the heavenly messenger, "venne alla porta e con una verghetta la perse che non vebe alcun ritegno." Ah, the scorn that filled his holy presence. He reached the gate and touched it with a wand. It opened without resistance from inside. So it's like Virgil had the gate slammed shut in his face and couldn't accomplish anything. The heavenly messenger just comes and touches the gate with a little wand, and it's easily opened without any further resistance at all.
I was noticing also as I was rereading the canto in preparation for our conversation, that the beginning of the canto really emphasizes Dante's fear. So it's a fear at the end of Canto 8, and he's still afraid at the beginning of Canto 9, which really reflects this idea that he's not sure if Virgil can really get them through this this whole situation. And so Virgil's doubts amplify Dante's fear, and especially when the Furies are screaming and for Medusa, who can turn people to stone, and then Dante is told, "Turn around and cover your eyes," as though Virgil really believes that Dante can be turned to stone on this journey, whereas this journey has been set up, by Beatrice, by God, so that Dante's going to get through, and nobody's going to be turning him to stone, but that Virgil is kind of using his hands to cover Dante's eyes. He's really showing his own doubts about, can this really happen? Can we get through this? So in spite of him having been here, done that, he's so confident, yet he keeps showing that he's not confident and that he doesn't have this kind of ability to get them through this really first kind of major obstacle that has stymied them.
Well, and the heavenly messenger, who, oh, it stinks so bad, kind of the scornful way he approaches, and the verghetta. I love the verghetta. That it's the diminutive. It's a little wand or a little stick that he uses to open the gate. That just piles on the humiliation for Virgil.
Right. So let me talk a little bit about the verghetta, because long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, I did some research about the verghetta. And one of the things that's interesting about that word is that as far as I recall from my research, it's the only time the word is ever used in medieval Italian, or it's in Dante in Canto 9 of the Inferno. So it's not a very common word. And so if you look at different translations of this passage, you see different people translated in different ways. So I think literally it means a little stick. I think Musa's translation uses wand. I saw another translation that used scepter. And so there's several different meanings that this vergetta can have. Little wand, I think you mentioned also. And so the wand, of course, is associated with magic, the thaumaturge or the magician's wand, with that kind of magic power. The scepter is the sign of the king's power. So, kings are always holding that various forms of a small kind of stick that represents his power as king. It also represents the baton of a messenger. So traditionally, messengers carried some kind of baton that was a sign that they were a messenger. In particular, the caduceus of Hermes, the messenger of the gods. So that's kind of where that comes from. It's also associated with the rod of Jesse because of its association with the angel of the Annunciation. The angel of the Annunciation is often depicted in the 13 and 1400s, appearing before Mary with some kind of, originally it was a stick and then later it became a flower, but it was meant to represent the rod of Jesse. And so associated with the Annunciation. And it's also related to the cross or the standard with a banner that depictions of the resurrection often show Jesus coming out of the tomb with kind of advancing his banner in front of him, triumphant over the grave, as it were. And this idea, of course, connects to the idea of the first advent that I think we're planning on talking about a little bit later. So I won't spoil the surprise now. So those are all the associations that the vergetta can give us in terms of its symbolic meaning.
So it's a very rich symbol, but at the same time, a very simple symbol in that it's this symbol of Virgil's humiliation and Dante's repudiation of him.
Sure.
Now, the significance of that repudiation is something to consider and think about. And traditionally, it's been interpreted as a repudiation of human reason. It's been looked at very allegorically that Virgil, representing human reason, can't get the pilgrim beyond certain obstacles, and instead he needs divine grace symbolized by the heavenly messenger. But I actually would like to see the whole episode here in Canto 9 as being much more about Virgil as a concrete person, as a concrete writer of the Aeneid. And I think that Dante, while the allegorical interpretation is certainly reasonable, that what Dante's really doing here is repudiating Virgil as a poet. So why do I say that? I say that because of the significance of the gates of Dis. So these gates that Virgil and Dante have approached in Canto 9, the description of them is taken largely from the description of Tartarus in the 6th book of the Aeneid. And in that episode of Tartarus, Aeneas asks his guide, the Sibyl, about what's going on over there within the walls of Tartarus. And the Sibyl answers at line 563 in book 6 of the Aeneid, nulli fas castos galeratum insistere lime, which in Fagel's translation goes, no pure soul may set foot on that wicked threshold. So in Virgil's text, when they reach a place that looks very like the gates of Dis in Inferno 9, Virgil's character is told, oh, no, you can't go there because no pure soul may set forth into that area where the sinful are punished. But of course, that's just the opposite of what Dante's doing in the Inferno. Virgil can't cross the wicked threshold of the gates of Dis, but that's exactly what Dante's journey must be about and what must happen. He must cross that threshold. And the implications of that are that Dante's vision is one in which you must face your sinfulness in order to progress towards salvation, that you can't make any progress until you face sin. Whereas Virgil thinks there are things called pure souls that can't cross the threshold of evil, that they have to stay on this side, or their purity is presumably at risk. And that is diametrically opposed to how Dante thinks about this, because to Dante, nobody is a pure soul. Nobody is without sin. And we all need to face our sin. One of the most popular biblical quotations from the book of Proverbs in the Middle Ages was the famous, even the just man sins 7 times a day. There's a sense that everyone sins, so everyone must face their sinfulness. There are no pure souls who are banned from crossing the threshold of evil. So Virgil's inability to cross there in his own poem is now shown to be mistaken by Dante's poem, where they have to cross that sill. But Dante first humiliates his character, Virgil, who can't cross that sill on his own. They need the heavenly messenger to help. So that Virgil's gravest sin in the Aeneid is not facing his own sinfulness and not encouraging others to face their own sinfulness. To me, that concrete reading, looking at it as being about a concrete poet rather than allegorical human reason, is really important. And I like to do that kind of concrete reading as opposed to the more allegorical stuff.
Sure.
You, on the other hand.
I love the allegorical stuff. So let me talk a little bit about the 3 Advents of Christ in Inferno 9, which comes from a concept developed by Mark Musa. So is this time for our full disclosure? Full disclosure. We are students of Mark Musa.
Yes, we studied with Mark at Indiana University way back in the dark ages. And in some ways, we want this whole discussion between us to be a kind of memorial and testimony to Mark.
Yes, to him. So in interpreting that statement of Dante the poet about let the smart person pay attention to the meaning of my verses, Musa develops the idea of 3 Advents of Christ. And he doesn't actually develop the idea of the 3 Advents. He gets them from St. Bernard, but he's the one who applies them to this section of, not just this section of the Inferno, but actually as an overall structural element of the Divine Comedy. So the 3 Advents of Christ, according to St. Bernard, are the first Advent, which is the life, death, descent into hell, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So the historical coming of Christ into the world, and especially important for what we're talking about, the harrowing of hell. The second Advent is the daily coming of Christ into the lives of Christians. So not necessarily daily reception of communion, which is not something that was really a medieval practice, but just the daily welcoming or expectation that Christ will enter into the life of a Christian on a daily basis. And that has its parallel or its situation in Purgatory 8, because Mark's concept is that the first canto of the Inferno is really an introduction to the whole Commedia. And so Canto 2 is really the first canto of the Inferno, and therefore Canto 9 is really Canto 8 of the Inferno, and therefore Purgatorio 8 is parallel with Canto 9. And in that Purgatorio 8, the 2 angels come at sunset and drive the serpents away. And that is a representation then of that daily coming. They come every sunset, that daily coming into the life of the the souls in purgatory. And then the third advent is the last judgment, which hasn't happened yet, will happen at the end of time. But in the context of the Commedia, it occurs with Beatrice in the Purgatorio 30. So that we have the past event, the specific historical event of Christ coming into the world, and then the daily coming of Christ that is continuous in the present, and then a final coming, the last judgment, the third advent at the end of time. And so this first advent then represents the harrowing of hell in particular. So the point at which Jesus comes down into hell and knocks down the gates of hell to let the virtuous souls out. So we're recapitulating that with the angel and his little vergetta. That's why it's connected to that image of Christ with the cross or the standard with the banner in the resurrection. So it's the result of the harrowing of hell. I think I've mentioned in the past that I've tried to stage a scene of the harrowing of hell, and it's very difficult to do because you can't have a big battle scene between Jesus and Satan because Jesus is going to win, and there's nothing that Satan can do. So you can't have a great fight scene. But what you do get is what we see here with this angel messenger who comes down and is so disdainful because this job is so easy. He just has to touch the gate with his little stick, and it bursts open, and then he leaves because he has better, more important things to do and to worry about. And so the kind of ease with which the gates are opened by the messenger is a recapitulation, as I said, of the harrowing of hell, of Jesus being able to easily, and a virtuous soul, right, who is able to cross that threshold. So I think those are the ways that the allegorical reading of this, I think most scholars agree that this allegorical reading that Musa has developed is one that most people follow from and build from that rather than searching for other concepts.
Well, and certainly I see the value of such allegorical or structural readings, but I will say that one of the things that I learned from Mark is that literal concrete level of the poem is really important. And if we get too caught up in the allegorical and structural aspects, we can miss so much on that really concrete, literal level. Yeah. And so that's why I'm always drawn back to, well, let's think about this not as Virgil as human reason, but Virgil is Virgil. And
he's Virgil too.
Concrete.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I agree with you that the concrete matters. The story is just good by itself as a story. You don't actually need the allegory to understand the story. But I do find that the structure of the Commedia and the levels, there's so many levels of meaning that it just amazes me, Dante's genius, to be able to conceive of this whole thing and to structure this vision of what the Divina Commedia is. So I love this canto, and it's because we got that blend of the allegorical and the literal.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for talking with me about Inferno 9, and thank you all for watching and listening. Bye.
Bye.